Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be starting a new project for the Corvette. And we actually talked about this in a previous video when we were doing the brake duct install of the C7 kit, basically the C7 Z06 and the C7 ZR1. You'll remember I put that on the front of the spindles here on both the driver and passenger side. I'll have a picture of that here. Well, in that video, I thought that there was a optional, basically, wheel blocker brake kit thing that was also available for the C7 Z06 and the C7 ZR1. And after doing a bit of research, I found it. And you guys will see that here. So before we get into that, I wanted to make sure that this would fit the carbon ceramic brake kits on the C7 ZR1. Because I was like, actually the Z06 as well. So basically, if they weren't going to fit those, I think the C601 uses the same rotor size as the C701 and the Z06. So if I remember correctly, those are a carryover. I think the one part that is different between the C6 and C7 is basically the hub ring. So basically this part that bolts to the wheel hub, I think they're offset differently if I remember correctly. And so yeah, I'll include some pictures here off a guy with, I think it was a C7 ZR1 where he added this kit, and you guys can see it clears his brakes without any major issue. So I was able to find the part number. It's part number 840-38185. And this whole kit, if you look at it, these are actually bigger than the supercharger for a 2650 and an LS9. So yeah, these rings are quite huge, and I'll actually include a picture of how the shift here and the interesting shipping job that they did. They basically put this in a USPS box, they wrapped it in brown wrapping paper, and then they put it inside a plastic bag and they shipped it. So I don't know, just the most interesting packaging I've ever seen. And I mean, I get why they did it, but it caused this thing to get ripped up, and you guys can see this tape on there. So USPS, actually, it looked like they had lost the package. Basically, long story short, it got sent to lost and found. I have never had an issue with UPS, USPS, or FedEx where a package has gone lost and then you, the receiver, had to submit paperwork to get them to work on it. I was like, what kind of crap is this? So I reached out to eBay, reached out to the seller, and basically the seller said, oh, that's USPS's problem and not mine. And so with the seller being useless and eBay not really being able to help me unless I wanted a refund, I was going to have to do all the legwork. So went to the auction, downloaded all the pictures. I found basically you could submit a ticket to give paperwork of what USPS needs to try to look for. And I included the picture. Basically it was a bag, steel ring, and then at the very bottom here there are some bolts. You guys can see those bolts right there. So I'm the one, the buyer, having to do all this work, and I'll be honest guys, it kind of pissed me off. Like, this shouldn't be on me, this should be all on the buyers, but it is what it is. It did eventually get here, and I can't be too mad because if you guys can see this picture here, I only paid $10 for the setup. So unfortunately, the person I bought it from, it looked like they did estate auctions, and they didn't really sell car parts. They didn't know how to wrap it. If this was in a box, I don't think we would have had an issue, but the fact that they put it in some cardboard and then wrapped it in paper and then wrapped it in plastic, they obviously don't know what they're doing with automotive stuff. So paid $10 for it. Shipping was 12 bucks, so it was like $22 total. So I can't be too butthurt, but this whole project starts off with a bad vibe of just being annoyed. So anyway, with that intro, what we're going to be doing is trying to retrofit that C7 kit onto the front of our C6. And fortunately, I happen to have an extra front spindle. Has a bad ball joint, and you guys can see the tore boot there. But what we're able to do is basically mock this kit up without having to take the car apart. I haven't done alignment or anything on the front, but what this allows us to do is mock up this part without having to take the car apart, take the rotor off, take the wheel off, take the caliper off, maybe even having to take the wheel hub off. This will just give us a good starting point in case we need to modify stuff. And the work that I'm talking about is basically maybe having to make up some spacers and drilling and tapping a couple things to get these to bolt onto the C6 spindle. The C7 spindle, as you can see in this picture here, basically came from the factory with these holes already tapped and drilled into them. Now, I don't know if the base models had the brake ducts drilled into it, but I'm assuming that they do. So, and as you can see, our C6 spindle does not have any additional holes on here that's drilled for a brake duct, a brake shield, or anything like that. So, yeah, so let's go ahead and get this kit open. This says passenger, but actually this is the driver's front. This might be the passenger rear, but for the driver's front, the steering rack is in the front, not the back. So, steering rack up front, caliper in the back, and that is the complete opposite of what this piece shows. So let's get the kit open. We'll show you what's in it. All right, reviewing the instructions. Wheel blocker is for track use only. After track event, remove the wheel blocker. Reinstall the original splash shield. Failure to reinstall the original parts may lead to damage to wheel blocker, noise, premature pad, and rotor wear. I think what they're worried about is also potentially a rock getting stuck between this shield and the back of the rotor, and those are carbon ceramic rotors, so that is something to consider. And actually, I have managed to get a rock stuck on both calipers between the wheel and the caliper. So that's happened on both sides. There's actually a ring around the entire inside of the wheel. You guys can barely see it. I know it's there. So yeah, that is something to be considered, that you could get something stuck between the rotor and the shield. So yeah, basically take the rotor, take the caliper off, reinstall the shield, figure 2 over here, put the new shield on, put the caliper, rotor, everything back on, tighten it down. And as you guys can see from figure 3 here, the shield is actually supposed to be pointed away from the rotor, not wrapping around it. So when you guys mostly see brake shields and ducts and all that stuff, they're usually like kind of wrapped around the bottom of the rotor. Well, this is specifically designed to go, the opposite direction and block, I think, air from getting between the rotor and the caliper and stuff. So, and then the only thing else they give you in this kit is the 2 wheel blocker rings, as well as this little hardware. It looks to be a 10mm head with a 6 or 8mm thread. So yeah, let's go ahead and try to mock up the ring. You guys can see I already have it sitting on here. The reason I have it placed where it is because it kind of looks where the caliper has room here, the caliper has room up top, and then in the back here you guys can see this casting mark. I don't know if that's the best place to put this, because if you look at it, that's almost directly in path with the, where the tie rod goes, the outer tie rod. So yeah, that's something to be worried about. And then trying to center this, we've got, it looks like we could drill and tap that one right there. That one looks like it won't be too much of an issue. And as for this top one, you guys can see there is a gap there. There's probably, I don't know, up to a 1/4 inch gap between the top of the shield and the aluminum upright on the spindle. That top one is the one that concerns me because there is a dip in the casting here. It's pretty thin over here on the front of it, and if we did had to make a spacer up, I almost would feel more confident welding it to the surface of the spindle than trying to run a spacer and trying to, basically bolt our way through it. So yeah, I mean, we could make up a spacer. That's not too bad of a job, but that's welding on aluminum, and this could get ugly really quick. I mean, at initial look, 2 out of the 3 holes look like they're completely flat and they'll bolt down. From the initial look, it looks like this will line up. If we're using the wheel hub as our flat plane, everything looks like it's relatively flat. The bottom goes down a little bit. The top is obviously sticking up a little bit, but I think everything looks fine there. I'm not seeing anything. It's not like, sitting like that by 1/2 inch or anything like that. It might be 1/8 of an inch. Taking another look at this might not be as difficult as I think it might be. This little space right there, I don't even think I would have to go ahead and get something made. I could potentially just take our aluminum spool welding gun, it's a MIG gun, switch the gas out to argon, which we have. The spool gun has its own aluminum wire in it. We could just build up a puddle and, obviously weld that up, like I said, 1/4 of an inch, and potentially just weld up a pool there and just flatten it with a file, and then drill the hole that we want to do. You know, the other option would be, it's something I haven't done in a super long time, is buried back here is our aluminum TIG welder, so our AHP welder. I literally haven't used that in probably 4 or 5 years or longer. And we could potentially do that same thing. Grab the argon tank, get some filler rod, and just start trying to build up a puddle there and try that. I'm sure that would be cleaner, but honestly, guys, I'd be more confident with just using the MIG. And then if we screw it up, we could always go to the TIG. But yeah, so if we decide to move forward with this, I definitely think I would start with the MIG aluminum spool gun welder. So yeah, that's potentially one fix for that. The other thing that I'm kind of potentially noticing here while we're looking at this is I don't know the offset of the C6 versus C7 calipers. They are different. C7 brakes will not work on a C6. C6 brakes will not work on a C7. It could be 1/8 of an inch, it could be a 1/2 inch, I don't really remember. But the wheels are even different, and the whole setup, I think on a C7, is pushed more farther out, and I think on the C6, it's pushed more further in. There's potential that the C6 rotor could hit this because it's simply, you know, the rotors have that offset in the hat that the rotor could potentially hit the inside of this, and that's not something we would want to do. So I think what we're going to need to do is take a wheel off, attempt to sneak this in back behind the caliper, and see if it'll even fit. I don't know if it will. We don't need to try to bolt it down. I just need to see if it'll fit. And for those of you guys screaming on the screen, just go ahead and grab a C7 spindle. Well, guys, honestly, we can't. Everything is different between a C7 and a C6. You have to use basically either all C6 hardware or all C7 hardware. Like I said, there's an offset difference on the hub. The brakes won't swap over. The calipers won't swap over. There's a whole bunch of stuff and little differences and basically idiosyncrasies between the two setups where we can't just do that. The easy setup would be just go find a C7 spindle, C7 hub, bolt it on, but we've already got all this money on the ZR1 kit, the C6 stuff. I'm not about to go re-engineer the wheel by buying all new stuff. So if this fits, great. If it doesn't, we're only out, what, the 20 bucks that we spent on this. So, all right, guys, I think it's been about a week since the last time that we worked on this. And as you guys can see, we do have the C7R wheel blocker mocked up with a lot of painter's tape. Obviously, that's not going to be the final setup, but I wasn't even sure if this thing was going to clear between the rotor caliper and the spindle, because like I said, you know, that stuff is all a little bit different between the C6 and the C7. So obviously we've got a lot of tape up here, but one thing that has changed since we have mocked it up, you guys will see this tie rod shield from Shane Greenwood. I think his website was SGR Racing or something like that. I'll correct that down below. But this has actually kind of changed how I think I want to mount this. And seeing those two shields kind of like pretty much hitting each other, I'm kind of like, well, maybe you could do kind of two birds, one stone thing and basically have that heat shield on there, keep it there. But what we'll do is we could use that as an adapter that we could basically bolt a tab from, you know, the C7 wheel blocker to that heat shield tab and basically kind of be an adapter, and that way we don't have to go drilling anything on our spindles. So that's kind of got my wheels turning here, and I might reach out to Shane to see if he can make us a new tie rod shield, make it a little bit bigger, and that way we could get it to cover where the bolt hole is trying to line up for this very front. Now, the top and bottom, that I think I'm going to change my design as well. What we might end up doing is just going ahead and welding a tab to the spindle. That'd be a lot easier to fabricate, and kind of using the idea from this tie rod heat shield. And if we just have two tabs welded onto the spindle, there's no risk of drilling a hole through anything and hitting something. That's kind of my biggest worry, is if we start drilling holes through the spindle, both in the top and the bottom part, you know, you could definitely weaken it. By having a tab just welded to the front of it, I don't think it would weaken it that much, if at any. And then whatever holes and the spacers and adapters we need, we can use that tab as the foundation, and then we can make our decision on how far we need to move this shield in or out and kind of make our final measurements based off that. I think that would almost be a much better setup. The way I have this pretty much kind of, I'm calling it duct taped or mocked up on here, I basically have the shield taped right to the back of the ceramic disc. If you guys actually saw, you know, if I had a little less tape on here, this actually is probably, you know, if we actually had it bolted to where it was going to hit the spindle, you guys can see I have 2 fingers here. So the spacing is already incorrect as it is. But like I'm saying, if we have a tab there, we could custom make our own spacer, whatever we need. Yeah, if you guys can see the spacer here, that's sitting probably at least a solid 1/2 inch between the bottom of the spindle here and the shield. So, you know, we'd obviously take up some room with the tab. Then we could put a piece of hardware between this hole and then the tab that we're going to put right here. You know, I think that would work really well. And then for the top hole, you guys can see pretty much the same thing as the bottom. It's not lining up with the spindle. It's a little bit offset back behind it. If we had a tab coming out, you guys could drill a hole, go through there, put up whatever size spacer we need. And I think that would be the best way to do this. So here's a little bit of a better picture. Basically, kind of like I was saying, that top hole was not quite aligning with the spindle here. And same thing with the bottom. It wasn't aligning with the spindle here. It's more wanting to be like right here, and same thing over here. Basically, it's trying to be right here, just a little bit behind where it goes. So I'm pretty sure the C7 spindle, it's just wider. And if you guys saw the pictures from the earlier part of the video, pretty sure that it was. I don't have a C7 spindle here to show you a direct comparison. And actually, guys, now that I'm thinking about it, I did find a couple extra pictures of this spindle setup. So we'll throw those in here. And what you guys are seeing is basically a C7 spindle with this shield attached with none of the brakes or rotors installed. So as far as welding or doing anything like that, I do have plenty of aluminum strips. Last time I think I went to Lowe's, I just picked up a bunch of different sizes and thicknesses. So we would probably use something like this, or we could use this aluminum bracket that we did not use on our Kong intake. That is a little bit thicker. That's probably a 1/4 inch thick. I think all this stuff is an H in thick. And that would be fine. Because the way this stuff is set up, it's just a shield. We just need to bolt it to something. It doesn't need to be super thick. And if we really, really needed it, I think the way these tabs would work, we could put a nut on the backside. That way we could tighten it down. Now, are we going to see any of that in this video? Short answer is going to be no. The reason we're not going to see it pretty much anytime soon is because the 427 is close to getting done. Ken called me recently. He's finished up the machine work on the bottom end, so all he's got to do is, I think, do the final hone on the new sleeves that he put in. We put that in a recent video. So he's getting close to doing final assembly. So once he gets all that knocked out, and my engine is the next one he's working on, you know, in the next couple of weeks, he's probably gonna be calling me asking for parts. So actually earlier today, I finalized our billet block with the LS9 map sensor. I happened to find a longer bolt for that. We've got our vacuum port sensor for the map sensor on board for the Haltech. That's that aluminum fitting there. I also took apart the car a little bit, and you guys will see some hoses and bolts in here. You will see our steam port setup. So that's actually the steam port that goes to the front of the motor. Here's an AN fitting for that steam port. And then the bigger hose, you guys can see, that's a -12 or 3/4 inch line. That is half of the blower lines. Unfortunately, the way I designed the driver's side coolant lines coming out of the heat exchanger, I did not put a break in there where I can disconnect it. So the passenger side, I was able to disconnect. I have the Y, and that goes into, you know, the inlets or the outlets of the cooling break. Doesn't really matter which one. But yeah, so long story short, we're gonna have to make up some lines for the other two, probably the outlets on the bricks, and go from there. And so yeah, I'm gathering parts for the final assembly and then the engine dyno. And actually, I need to pull the gas pedal out of the car because the Haltech, the Rebel LS, uses a C6 gas pedal. So I actually need to pull that out. I just forgot about that, so I need to do that. So honestly, worrying about some brake shield project that is pretty strictly for road course only. It's not high on my priority list. We got to get the Corvette engine done. And then at some point, we got to start doing the final assembly on the LT4. We're close on this, but we're just not there yet. So motor, dyno, install the motor, chassis dyno, and that's probably 2 months worth of work there. And then LT4 stuff. So from that big list of projects, this is obviously very low on that totem pole, and it's going to be sitting on the back burner for a while. But if you guys want to follow along for the rest of these builds, the LS9 build, the 427 build, the engine dyno, the chassis dyno, all that stuff, hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications. If you guys want to help support the channel, check out the links down below. I'll probably just end up giving you the part number for the brake shield kit, because like I said, I found this used on eBay for very cheap. I don't think we'll be able to find it on Amazon. Maybe we will, maybe we won't, I don't know. But so we'll drop you links for that. And if you guys want to help support the channel, check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. Like I was talking about C6 parts, we've still got a bunch left over. Got some here, got some up over there, way down there on the shelf. We still got some inventory left over. So we've got used parts, hats, t-shirts, stickers, sweatshirts. There's some other stuff in there. Coffee cups, yeah, that's a random one. And Christmas tree ornaments. So all that stuff's all on the website, and that's going to be it. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.